It's wonderful to have Andreea-Maria Lemnaru with us today, really the organizer and the inspiration for this conference. And yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting the event. I'm very happy about the first talks and about the enthusiasm all of you showed for that conference. Actually, I wish today's conference to be the first step of a research network devoted to the study of feminine principles in philosophy and ancient religions. So all those of you who would be interested in being part of this research group are, of course, welcome to contact me or Professor Headley, who showed also great enthusiasm in that project. I will be speaking today about the world soul, the goddess Hecate in Neoplatonism, with several objectives that I will tell you. Is there another handout? It's not mine. It's yes. So the whole point of that project and of my talk today is to show actually that, well, first, that religions and metaphysics are not enemies of the feminine in the ancient world, and quite the contrary. So feminism doesn't need to destroy tradition. Tradition and feminism are compatible. And second, I would like us to demonstrate that there is rather a continuity than an opposition between pagan positive feminine principles and Christian autonomous feminine principles such as the Holy Spirit. In other words, that beyond the myth of the original sin and the fall of man, the feminine is not negative in Christianity. Because, as you all know, in Abrahamic religions, the feminine is supposed to be evil and weak, such as the Great Abyss and Lilith in the Kabbalah, like Luz de Mar just demonstrated earlier. And third wave feminism nowadays wants to break free from all religious legacy because of this. And gender studies wish to deconstruct the very concept of the feminine and the masculine. And it is with that background that I wish to demonstrate that the feminine is not associated with weakness or evil in the ancient world, and more specifically in Neoplatonism, through the figure of the world soul, the goddess Hecate. So I would like to demonstrate to you that, well, the feminine as a metaphysical principle in Neoplatonism in general, but today, more specifically in Iamblichus and in the Chaldean oracles, means several things. So it means strength, not weakness, good, not evil. Since the world soul is identified with the primarily undifferentiated state of being, she is the mistress of the very process of differentiation. The feminine is a peiron, but at the same time the key holder of the peras, the limits. The feminine is autonomous, not depending on a male consort. She has an ontological autonomy, even though she interacts with male principles such as the nous. And the most important part, that does not mean that the world soul, the feminine in Iamblichus and the Chaldean oracles, depend on a male principle, but neither that she is opposed to a male metaphysical concept, because the feminine and the male principle are not enemies in Neoplatonism. There is a balance between them. They work together. Another thing I would like to demonstrate to you about the world soul in Iamblichus today is that, well, it is fertile, not barren, and it is, last but not least, the alpha and omega, at the same time, the origin and the destination of all individual souls. So this is the objective of my talk today. As Lowy reminds us, by the 2nd century AD, the threefold Hecate had become a universal, omnipotent goddess, whose three faces would be those of the phases of the moon, so the waxing moon, Artemis, the full moon, Selene, and the dark moon when the latter disappears from the sky and descends into the underworld, according to the Eleusinian myths, Persephone or Hecate. Logically enough, as we shall demonstrate, Hecate was the principal goddess of Theurgy in Iamblichus and in the Chaldean oracles. She played a fundamental role in the incarnation and ascent of souls in the theurgic union that prepares the soul for post-mortem, for its post-mortem existence, and in the creation of miraculous statues. But this is a next aspect I will not explore today. The material side of the cult of Hecate shall be left aside for today. Curiously, despite the importance of the goddess in late antiquity, few studies have been specifically devoted to her, such as those written by Johnston and Zographou. Her role as a key metaphysical principle in Iamblichus's religious system of thought, based on the Chaldean oracles, is thus the purpose of my study today. I wish more specifically to demonstrate that Hecate's association with fire and air distinguishes her from the Chthonian dimension of the goddess as displayed in the Greco-Egyptian papyri, while bringing her closer to Aphrodite and Rhea, the goddesses with whom she is associated in the Chaldean oracles. And second, that philosophically speaking, she is identified with the world soul, but also with major principles such as harmonia, syngeneia, kinship, and philia, standing at the heart of the cosmological paradigm of sympatheia. And third, that her role in Neoplatonism is quite different from that of Sophia in early Christian texts, who, although she is described as luminous and a pure spirit, is the first to destroy the harmony of the eons, to quote Professor Edwards in his study on the Christians, the Gnostics, and philosophers in late antiquity, who will, after my talk, of course, tell you a lot more and much better than me about Sophia. However, before beginning this, I wish to address two questions you may ask yourselves, and people usually ask me when I talk about the role of Hecate in Neoplatonism, and more specifically in Iamblichus. The first question would be, well, does Iamblichus mention Hecate at all as such? First question. Well, no, of course, Iamblichus does not such thing. And then you would say, how do we know that she was that important to Iamblichus if he does not even speak of her? How can we reconstruct Hecate's and the world souls as the world soul's influence without her being quoted as such? So here's the answer. First, we find in the De Mysteris a mention of the world soul appearing as a formless fire, I quote. So it's the fragment 148 of the Chaldean oracles, which is the same expression that the Chaldean oracles therefore use to speak about the way that Hecate manifests to mortal beings. Second, Porphyry, Iamblichus's master, left us oracles of the goddess, which we know thanks to the evangelical preparation of Eusebius. And we also know that Proclus, who was Iamblichus's disciple, conversed with apparitions of the goddess, and he used her sistrums and wrongs, while Maximus of Ephesus initiated his fellow students into the mistress of a sanctuary of Hecate. Now, I would like to begin by the dyadic dimension of Hecate as the source, but also the apeiron and keyholder of Peras. As a matter of fact, Hecate is presented as the dyad who sits beside the primordial monad in the Chaldean oracles. Thus, the world soul is oriented, as we know in Neoplatonism, towards both the highest and the lowest levels of being. On the one hand, the noetic realities, and the world of matter which proceeds from her on the other hand. But unlike Sophia in the 9th book of the second Ennead of the Nag Hammadi texts, like Professor Edwards points out in his study on Christians, Gnostics, and philosophers in late antiquity, Hecate, the world soul in Neoplatonism, and more specifically in Iamblichus, does not look down or only towards the Father, as in the Valentinian myth. Even if just like Sophia, she is equated with the moon in Clementine homilies, where Helena appears to have been confounded with the name Selene. However, Hecate seems to have shared common characteristics with the Gnostic autonomous feminine principle Barbelo. So, as Margaret Barker wrote in her previous paper, there was a very important quote of the 3 stills of Seth in Nag Hammadi 7:5, which is, "You have been divided everywhere, and you have remained one, and also you are a shadow of the pre-existent one." So these features, these characteristics, are those of both the early Christian Barbelo and of the goddess Hecate, equated with the world soul. Besides, as the world soul, she is the intellective membrane that both binds and dissociates the first and second fires, hence her dual nature, also not divided. That's a very important point. So the world soul is dual, but she cannot be divided. As a matter of fact, she has the dual function of containing the intelligibles through the nous and introducing sensation into the world. To put it otherwise, she occupies the intermediate position between the nous and matter. She is the boundary between the 2 realms, the limen, the link that divides, to use Johnston's terms, so the peros, but the link that divides is the very link that connects. And that's a very important point. So Hecate is thus be said to be double-faced, amphipros, an adjective that is also applied to Janus bifrons. These faces express the ability of the world soul to interact with the 2 levels of reality I just mentioned, of which she is the guardian. Indeed, she is said to be Kleidukos, of the portals and thresholds between nous and matter, the old and the new year, the old and the new month, the soul's entry into a body across the boundary between the immaterial and physical worlds, and its ascent. As such, she is described as metaxu. According to Einar Thomassen, the passion of Sophia in Valentinian early Christian texts serves to express the same idea as the infinite apeiron nature of the dyad in monistic Pythagoreanism and thus Neoplatonism, that is to say, Hecate, based on knowledge early Christians must have had of the Pythagorean and Platonic traditions of thought. However, one may notice that the Chaldean world soul is never depicted in a denigrating manner. She has not fallen, even if we find, as Professor Edwards has pointed out in his study that we have already mentioned above, a narrative in which Sophia avoids the fall in the Nag Hammadi Enneads in 2:9-10. The world soul, the Chaldean world soul, doesn't suffer either, nor has to achieve redemption, pathos being an attribute of individual souls because of their attraction towards matter. Furthermore, unlike the early Christian Sophia, the Neoplatonic Hecate's offspring produced without a male consort is not defective or unbalanced. It is not, I quote Nag Hammadi, formless abortion lacking the male form. since the world soul is the source of all individual souls that emanate from her, which are considered as divine by Iamblichus. Here, I wish to highlight a very important point that I will not develop, but it deserves to be mentioned, which is the difference, of course, between creation and emanation. Because in Abrahamic religions, and more specifically in Christianity, you have demiurge that creates the world. Also, that very same notion can be found in the Hermetica, whereas in the Neoplatonic system of thought, you have, well, it is an emanationism, as most of you already know, but that's a very important difference, because to create something and a principle emanating from something else is does not suppose the same background. Emanationism supposes, of course, non-being, whereas creationism doesn't. Again, unlike the early Christian Sophia, and that's the last point of comparison I shall do between Hecate and Sophia. So Hecate is not, to quote again Professor Edwards, a mixture of the virgin and the harlot. That's a very interesting expression that does not apply to Hecate, because on the contrary, she is rather a metaphysical figure of the mother. As a matter of fact, although the Chaldean world soul has sprung away from the nous and the one, she is associated with fertility, since she is both the cradle the individual souls originate in and the womb they return to when they regenerate through Theurgy or after their earthly existence. So Theurgy spoke about the regressus ad uterum. So yes, that's basically the point I wish to make here. And as such, the world soul is, in the Chaldean oracles, the Chaldean Hecate is identified with Rhea as an avatar of the mother goddess on her throne, so the Anatolian Kybele. Similar here to the living creature in Ezekiel of Dr. Barker's study. As so Sarah Johnston notes, Sarah Johnston highlights this association between the mother goddess and Hecate in the Chaldean oracles. So Hecate personifies the cosmic flow of air, just like Rhea, of fire and water. So that's very important, interesting, based on what you said earlier, you know, when you mentioned air and water in the Bible, and Jesus talking about air and water, because here Hecate is associated with air, fire, and water, but identified with the goddess, the Greek goddess Rhea. So in short, she represents the flow of becoming, both in the sense that it leads the soul to descend into a body, and in the sense that it allows it to rise again once it has found its channel, the very one it used to descend into matter. This is why she is identified with Rhea, whose name etymologically derives, as we have said earlier, from reo, to flow. So I quote a fragment, a passage of the Chaldean oracles, which is, Rhea is the source and stream of blessed intellectual realities, for she, first in power, receives the birth of all these in her inexpressible womb, kolpoiosin aphrastois, and pours forth this birth on the all as it runs its course. She's both the source and stream of intellectual realities, and nature is suspended from her. Chaldean oracles, fragment 70, and she is also said to be, I quote, the mistress of life, Zois Despotes, who possesses full measures of the many wombs of the world. Chaldean oracles, fragment 96. Hecate is not only the moon's, but also the sun's goddess, and that's a very interesting point. She's said to be Helioio Paredros Episcopeos Polon Hagnon. So she's related to the sun. She's the consort. She's the sun's consort. And Proclus refers to her as, I quote, mother of the gods with many names. Theon Meter, Polyonime, and guardian of the gates. Prothyraia in his hymn to Hecate, and Janus, deities who are both associated to the Limen. Hecate, as the infinite dyad, is therefore precisely the goddess of boundaries, Peras, between various realms of realities. Her keys open the gates separating the realms of the living and that of the dead, which traditionally opened those of Hades, which is why she was traditionally depicted not only with torches, but also guiding Persephone through the Eleusinian mysteries. In the Chaldean context, the world soul's keys also serve her to open the portal that stands between the sublunary world of wandering souls and that of purified souls, can ascend to their ochema thanks to their ochema pneuma, provided they have united with the goddess theurgically during their earthly existence. Indeed, the subtle vehicle of the soul, psyches lepton ochema, and its purification through mystical union with the goddess is at the heart of theurgic experience. During union with Hecate, the soul is replenished in the world soul in a process of regressus ad uterum, as Mircea Eliade used to put it. It is also Hecate who guides the soul through the 7 spheres once it has detached itself from the body, just as her purely Chthonian version guided them to the underworld. Consequently, she is the source principle and the source of sources, I quote, matrix that contains all things, pegeton pegon, metra synechusa tapanta, unquote. Her womb is life-bearing, zoogonos, which is why she spreads over the assembling gods the power of life-giving fire, whose heat animates all things. To put it otherwise, the world soul is what transforms dynamis into energeia. I wish here to quote a passage of the Stobaean Hermetica, which seems to me very clear in that matter, and also applying to Hecate, which is energeia, my child, has been called this very thing, anything brought into being, and also energeia is eternal and immortal in whatever body it finds itself, unquote. So this is what we read in the Stobaean Hermetic excerpt from the Discourses of Hermes with Tot. From the Chaldean world soul springs the genesis of multifaceted matter and the impetuous storm, gradually attenuating, I quote, the flower of her fire, unquote. The world soul in the Chaldean oracles is particularly associated with storms. She's considered as a hunting goddess of souls par excellence, at the head of a pack of dogs of the air, earth, and water, in keeping with her association with Artemis. In her left flank resides the source of virtue, while from her right flank gushes the flow of the primordial soul that animates light, ethers, fires, and worlds. So that passage from the Chaldean oracles is important since, well, it's ambiguous when it comes to the precise role of the world soul. Here, Hecate is the source of the world soul, while in other passages of the Chaldean oracles, she is the world soul itself. On the goddess's back, an immense nature is lifted, while her hair is considered as a vivid scintillation of light, I quote. However, whenever she appears to mortal eyes, she appears as a formless fire. So this is fragment 148 of the Chaldean oracles. After inspiring meritorious souls with leonine visions. As Clark, Dillon, and Hirschfeld point out in their edition of the Demisteris, this expression, fullness fire, is, as I said earlier, the only one used by Iamblichus in the Demisteris to refer to the goddess identified with the world soul. I quote the passage in Iamblichus: "That soul which is whole and not constrained by any form of particularity is seen as a formless fire, aneideos pyr, manifesting itself around the entire cosmos as a whole and divisible and formless source of the all." Hecate, again, in her life-giving function, which is inseparable from her life-taking function, for that who is able to create life is also able to destroy it, of course, but also because her identification with the moon she envelopes is associated with Aphrodite, which is a very interesting point too. In the fragment 173 of the Chaldean Oracles, she is called both celestial and starry. And here I wish to mention a passage in Plotinus about the celestial Aphrodite, which Plotinus associated with the world soul. I quote, "Aphrodite, who is his from him and with him, occupies the rank of soul, for she represents what is beautiful, brilliant, pure, and delicate in soul. For this very reason, she is called Aphrodite. Indeed, if we relate the male gods to the intellect of the nous, if we consider the goddesses as souls, because to each intellect is attached a soul, in this respect, again, Venus is related to Jupiter. Our doctrine on this point is confirmed by the teaching of priests and theologians, who always identify Venus with Juno and call her the star of Hera, the star of Venus. So that's, of course, the third Ennead, 5th treatise. Aphrodite has personified the principle of operative unification in the cosmos, and thus the conversion of souls towards the one since Empedocles. She is the link that holds all things together thanks to the heavy fire of love, hence her association with Hecate, the Chaldean world soul, in the Chaldean oracles. As she presides over the incarnation and ascent of souls, Hecate is the principal divinity of Theurgy. Indeed, during the Theurgic Genesis, understood as a preparation for death through a temporary exit and dissolution of the earthly self, the Theurgic soul unites with the world soul, the source of all souls, which it temporarily reintegrates. It is by taking the soul out of the body that the Theurgists teach it to correctly ascend to the world soul. Consistent with this interpretation, Hecate is referred to as a worker, ergatis, because she performs both the works of fire and those of Theurges. So, I hope that, well, here, as we have seen, the world soul meant and means strength, not weakness, based on her role in the Chaldean oracles and in Iamblichus's Demisteris. Since she's the source of everything that lives, just like Ezekiel's living creature, she is equated with good, not evil. Since she is identified with the primarily undifferentiated state of being, she presides over the very process of differentiation. She is also equated with the infinite apeiron, but at the same time is considered as the key holder of the peras, the limits. Again, she's autonomous. She does not depend on the male consort, but that does not mean that she's opposed to male metaphysical concepts, such as peras or nous. And last but not least, the Warsaw is considered as the Alpha and Omega, the origin and destination of all individual souls who are born in her and who come back to her after their earthly existence. Thank you.
May I start off with just a really fairly banal question, but one that is linked to the negative and positive aspects of the feminine that we were discussing, and then particularly with the wonderful paper that started off our conference on the Kabbalistic tradition, and particularly Lilith and this very negative feminine. In the English imagination, I think that Hecate, or Hecate as he calls her, is particularly grim. I mean,
Yes.
she's associated with the witches
Yes.
in Macbeth, and she somehow is associated by some sort of analogy with Lady Macbeth,
Yes.
right? So you've got these two manipulative, dark feminine forces in Lady Macbeth and Hecate. So why? I mean, what happened in the Renaissance for this? Or
This to happen.
Yes,
because
yes.
there is as negative.
I just say that in the
Yes.
light of obviously your emphasis on the positive.
Yes. Well, thank you. The question, well, this is because in the Greek magical papyri, Hecate was already Chthonian. She was already grim, as you say. So she was double, actually, because there was on the one hand the Hecate in magic, the goddess of magic, but of black magic. So she, who is a very ancient goddess, but and then no, I shall begin by the thing that, well, first in Hesiod, in Hesiod's Theurgy, she is presented as threefold. So, Chthonian, celestial, and aquatic. Then, in later sources, she divides. So, on the one hand, you have the Chthonian Hecate, the grim Hecate of the witches in the Greek magical papyri, and on the other hand, you have the celestial Hecate of Theurgic ascent of the Chaldean oracles. So there is this historical division between the threefold nature of the goddess at the beginning that were united, that were just together. She wasn't considered as only positive or only negative. She was ambivalent. And then these sides, the negative and the positive one, just divided, because on the one hand you had black magic insisted on the importance of the earthly self, you know, and the fact that, well, magicians would like to achieve success for their own sake, and that they were selfish. You had this vision of Hecate that became Lady Macbeth, of course. And then on the other side, you had the mystical Hecate, who dissolved the earthly self, who was completely opposed to Goetia. So she was not the goddess of magic and of black magic. She was, on the contrary, the goddess of, let's say, the soul's redemption. So this is this very interesting division between both of them. And the celestial Hecate, I think, became in early Christianity the Holy Spirit, and the other one in English imagination, but also in magical practice, is used by people to achieve always selfish earthly goals. So this division is not original, because in Hesiod's Theogony it wasn't there to begin with, but then it became as such, and she divided into these two paths, the path of light, let's say, and the path of darkness, which remained in Lady Macbeth. Yeah.
This is, thanks very much. Could we follow up on what you're saying about Hesiod? Because I mean, she was an important goddess for Hesiod. Was it the Works and Days that begins with a long prayer to her? But you know, she, in most classical literature, and even Roman period Greek literature, you get the impression that Hecate isn't a goddess to be worshipped, but that she is sort of literally an underground figure. You don't hear about her in Homer very much at all, I think, or in tragedy, or in the philosophers. But you know, she's clearly central to Hesiod, whose brother Perseus has a name that's linked to Hecate in mythology. So, I mean, do we think, you know, was there sort of this continuous period of Hecate worship, which wasn't just associated with magic, but we don't hear about it? Or is Hesiod being in some way rediscovered, reappropriated in late antiquity?
Thank you for the question. That's an excellent question. Well, it depends on if you consider that Hecate was from the beginning identified with the mother goddess or not. If you believe that she would be, we know that she was worshipped in the Eleusinian mysteries with Persephone. We know that she was holding the torches in the Eleusinian mysteries and that she had a very positive aspect by then. So she was a key figure. She was holding the keys of initiation of the mysteries. So yes, I don't think that there was this reappropriation. I think that it was already here, and that you had on the one hand the popular religion, and you had the negative side of Hecate there, where because people used to want to, of course, destroy their enemies, achieve economic success, etc., etc. And on the other hand, yes, you have the priests and the mystics, and the higher form of spirituality. So I think, yeah, both coexisted.
In my memory, there is another tradition about Hecate.
I can't hear you.
Another tradition, a late Homeric tradition, in which Hecate is associated with Hecate, the queen of Troya, who became slave of Ulysses after the fall of Troya, but she was the unique who flew away from the ship of Ulysses. He fell into the water and became an aquatic goddess.
Yes.
You remember? I have this memory. So a different tradition of Hesiod. In Hesiod, Hecate is daughter of Asteria, if I remember. So with Latona, connected with Selene, with the moon. But in this Homeric tradition, connected with water and with others. So Hecate infra.
Yes, it's true, but you already have this aquatic dimension in Hesiod's Theurgy, because she is described as mistress of the water, earth, and the sky. So you already have this in Hesiod, this aquatic dimension of Hecate. So I think, well, Homer insisted upon this dimension, but it was here from the beginning. Thank you. And you had the association, of course, between the moon and water, which was there also from the very beginning. Water being a symbol here of dissolution, undifferentiation. So Hecuba escaping from the ship of Ulysses would be that, well, the very principle of undifferentiation returns to its original symbol, which is the primordial waters. Yes.
Another question, if I may, from Pierago, I learned this identification between this Chaldean triad, Kronos, Hecate, Zeus, with the Neoplatonic intelligible triad, the Pater, Zoeus, or being, life, intellect. And in this identification, the father is the masculine figure. Life is the feminine figure, and the intellect, the androgynous figure. So this trinity, like father, mother, and so on, but so is androgynous. It is possible to find in Plato and in Aristotle a similar triad of being, life, and intellect, totally feminine, totally on the, for instance, in Crassus, Rhea had three daughters, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. And allegorically speaking, Hestia, the sea, is being. The essence. Demeter is the mother of vegetal life, Demeter of mother of Horus, and Hera, Eran, love, is the mother of sensible life. That's Plato. But in Aristotle, only philosophically speaking, the attributes of God in the book Lambda of the metaphysics are feminine. Ousia, protousia, the first essence, Ariste Zoe, better life, and noesis. Noesis, noesis, noesis. So, stuff, but ousia, Zoe, and noesis are feminine, all three.
Yes. Yes, you're right. That's, yes. What was the question?
No, it's
No, it's
consideration.
general. Yes, you're right. The
No,
first, yes, the
the
triad,
question
the
is
feminine
that
triad, yes.
in Chaldean,
Yes,
the feminine is only life, only the second
Yes.
principle. So masculine, feminine, and in other allegorical
yes.
interpretation, we can find that
Three
Ousia
of
is
them.
feminine.
Yes,
and
that
being.
Ousia is feminine and being as well. Yes, yes. Yes.
Not life.
Not only, yes, not life, but being. Yes,
Yeah.
up, you mean the upper
Yeah.
level. Yes, yes. It's,
Hestia, the goddess Hestia,
yes,
Ousia.
yes. Well, that's very interesting, especially, well, given that life in the Platonic tradition is considered as inferior to being.
Yes.
So, yes, you're right.
Yeah. Oh, yes, Matthias.
Yes,
Yes, I thought it's worth remembering that because we are speaking about positive and negative aspects. I think it's important to remember that all the Greek gods and goddesses had two aspects to them, because I think we fall prey to the great Greek philosophical tradition, which try to morally purify the gods, and of course Xenophanes and Plato himself. They argue that the gods are only good and the poets are liars. But if we look at religion, of course, gods and goddesses alike, it's not a feminine. We shouldn't associate the existence of this dark aspect only with the feminine. That would be a great mistake. In the Iliad, the first god that appears is Apollo, the god of healing, and he appears as plague. So that's fairly obvious that there was the underworld Zeus in Greek religion. So the heavenly Zeus and the Zeus existing in the underworld. So the tendency to see gods as light and dark, good and evil. I think it's all over Greek religion. So, but then because of philosophy, we try to see gods as moral, and I think we have to bear in mind both those perspectives. And thanks to Jung and Lewis, we rediscover this religious aspect of every symbol. Every symbol has a positive and negative aspect to it.
thank you. Well, actually, because what I refer to when I'm saying positive and negative isn't ethical. So you're talking about the ethical side, about morality being good or bad. But what I wish to address through this research is the ontological aspect, which is the upper level, creation and destruction. It's not being lying or not lying, because it's human problems, I'd say. I mean, the gods have nothing to do with human virtues or human problems in general. And that when I say, the positive aspect is creative aspect, when I say the negative aspect is the destructive aspect, not in the way that destruction would be bad. It's not in the moral way. It's in the way that the entropy, the force of destruction is opposed to the force of the creation, but in the sense of non-being becoming being in the ontological way, not in the moral, ethical way. So yeah,
I just want to. I'm not speaking about your paper, but about because you started with how this was received by the feminist scholarship, for instance, where
Oh,
due
yes.
to the collapse of imagination,
Oh, yes.
we tend
yes.
to moralize.
Demoralized.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
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 that's,
of course. Well, that's human, way too human, as Nietzsche would put it. Yes, yes.
On that point, I think we need to bear in mind our schedule.
Yes.
And that's, I think, a very fascinating question. I think also particularly the link between the moral and the physical in this area, and obviously the effect that monotheism has on that question, indeed. So let us thank our speaker for a wonderful and stimulating